What is up, and welcome to the Bet Chicago Sports Podcast. I am Shane Jackson. It is Friday, which means it's officially weekend time and game weekend time. The Bears fans will have to wait a little bit longer than normal for their game, which is on Sunday Night Football against the Green Bay Packers. I will be joined by Sean Hammond, our Bears beat reporter, to help preview the matchup. And essentially, just like we did last Friday, the goal is to get an inside look at the team and leading into the weekend, and hopefully that helps us determine what our bet is going to be on this particular game. Remember, if you are going to do it at the Caesar Sportsbook, which is the official odds partner of the Bet Chicago Sports podcast. All you have to do, really simple, if you're watching this in the video version, is scan the QR code right there in the right corner, and your first wager, you can get up to $12.50, and if you lose, you get it back. So pretty great deal for a new user offer. If you're listening to the audio version of this at a later date, just go to shawlocal.com/bet, where I write up all the content for Bet Chicago Sports, and click on any one of those articles. You click the link, and you can sign up through that way as well. I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast on all platforms. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, do it on YouTube as well. Basically every social media platform you can think of, subscribe to it. Follow it, all that stuff. It really helps it out. We are very new, but we're trying to grow. And we grow by having people on who are a lot smarter than me to talk. And so that's what's going to lead me to bring on Sean Hammond, our Bears beat reporter. He knows everything about the Bears, and he's a great guest to have on this Friday afternoon to preview the team ahead of a really exciting Week 2 Sunday Night Football matchup. Bears-Packers. Sean, what's kind of the vibe of the team coming off an upset win over the 49ers last weekend?
Yeah, Shane. Well, first of all, thanks for having me back. It's a good Friday here. Hope you're enjoying your day. The vibes are good here, and why wouldn't they be? The Bears just pulled off a win that maybe not a lot of people saw coming. They picked off the 49ers last week in that soggy mess at Soldier Field, and they have a lot of reason to be feeling good right now. I know they're big underdogs this week against the Packers, and they haven't beat them in a couple of years now. But the Packers look like they struggled in Week 1, and you never know what's going to happen. There's no reason why the Bears couldn't maybe surprise us here again this week.
Well, let's start like we did last week, and probably what we will start every week. Let's get the important information at the top. Injuries, newsworthy information right from the get-go. This is football. People care about that. It's necessary when you're placing a bet. Any injury for either team that we should know from this matchup?
Yeah, it's we're recording this at 4 o'clock on Friday, so we just got the Friday injury reports. I'm going to start with the Packers. They got some issues on that offensive line, especially David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, John Runyon, all expected to be starters on their line. They are all questionable for this game for various reasons. We saw some issues on that offensive line last week against the Vikings, and certainly, we don't know about those three. We don't know if one or multiple of them are going to be playing, but even if they're without one guy, two guys, or if worst case scenario they're without all three, that's going to be a big problem for them on the offensive line. Then you start talking about guys like Yash Nijman and Royce Newman, Zach Tom stepping into the lineup. Those are some relatively untested guys. You're talking about a left tackle who has 9 career starts, or a right tackle who is in Royce Newman, who's an Illinois native, who's probably best suited for guard. If that's the case, you're going to have some issues. And then also sticking with the Packers, Alan Lazard, we don't know what his status is. He's questionable, but he did not play last week either. We'll just sort of have to see how that's looking on game day. And then looking at the Bears, Velus Jones, he did return to practice for a day this week, but has been out since then. He did not practice on Friday, and he is doubtful for Sunday's game. I would lean towards he's probably not going to play. I don't really think there's a reason for the Bears to push it at this point with their rookie receiver. It's disappointing because, there's some high expectations for him, a third-round pick, but I think the Bears are going to play it safe most likely, and there's really no reason to rush him back.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like based off the injury reports all week, it's clear that the bigger need to know information is on the Packers side of things. And I was glad we really started with that because this is a big special game for Bears fans. We're actually doing another podcast on Sunday leading into kickoff at Sunday Night Football. And I have a Packers related guest scheduled for that one. So he'll be able to help provide more information on the Packers side of things and maybe that kind of last minute injury report as well as we kind of determine how to bet this game. But let's stick with the Packers for a minute. I mean, you can't talk about this matchup without talking about Aaron Rodgers and all the success he's had against the Chicago Bears in his career. Sean, going into this week, talking to all the players, I know Aaron Rodgers had a tough week one with that offense, especially with that new receiver room. What has been the general sense you've gotten from maybe players or coaches when asking about whether or not Aaron Rodgers, what they expect from Aaron Rodgers this week coming off that performance?
Yeah, when you talk to guys in the locker room, when you talk to players, when you talk to coaches, they're still saying Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. They don't really put a whole lot of stock into that week one performance. That he's got some new pieces at receiver. He's trying to figure out who his number one outlet is going to be now that Davante Adams is gone, and that might take a few weeks. But the expectation is that this Packers team is gonna pull this together here in the next couple of weeks. And the good thing maybe for the Bears is that they're catching them early in the season. It's week 2, and maybe they haven't worked out the kinks yet. They don't really seem to have that outlet that was Davante Adams. Whenever Rodgers was in trouble, that's the guy he looked to, and he dumped the ball off to Adams. And really, it was A.J. Dillon in that week 1 game, the running back, who sort of took that role, so to speak, at least in terms of just being that emergency outlet. But you want to be able to push the ball downfield a little bit more, not drop down, not check down to your running backs every single time. So the Packers got some things to figure out, but as far as like the perspective of the Bears, they're not falling for any of the outside talk. The Packers got off to a really rough start, a worse start, honestly, last year in week 1 against the Saints. And they were certainly fine moving forward, once they figured things out.
Yeah, probably going to be fine. It's hard to count against Aaron Rodgers, although there were concerns that were highlighted right in week 1. That's why, when I was on the Bears Insider podcast this morning, I mentioned one of my favorite props might be Aaron Rodgers to throw an interception, which I think is plus 229 at Caesar Sportsbook. Wrote about it for shawlocal.com/bet. Should be published tomorrow. But Aaron Rodgers has not thrown an interception since 2018, as you pointed out. But it feels like one of those situations where, hey, receiver runs the wrong route, Aaron Rodgers makes an errant throw or something like that combination. Maybe that could lead to an interception. Jackson got the best of Trey Lance last week. Maybe a little bit more difficult to bait Rodgers, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some miscommunication as this offense tries to sort itself out. Speaking of offense, let's dive into the Bears side of things. Luke Getsy made his debut as the OC for the Bears last week, but I almost feel like this week is more his debut because, he was probably limited in what he could do in week 1 with those conditions. He returns to Green Bay. What are you expecting maybe from this Getsy offense in Green Bay on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, I think the general game plan is going to be similar to that 49ers game. I do think they're going to really try to establish the run early in that game. And they tried to do that against the 49ers. They weren't necessarily successful doing it early in that game. They had a little bit more success late, but early on it was rough there for a while. But I agree with you that the conditions did sort of affect that game. You look at Justin Fields. He attempted 17 passes. I think that will be a little bit higher. I don't expect them to be throwing the ball a crazy amount in this offense. I still think they're going to rely on that run game. But certainly if they're down a touchdown in the fourth quarter, they're going to be throwing the ball a little bit more. And you're going to see Justin Fields complete more than 8 passes. That's not going to be a regular thing. And he's got to get Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney going, especially if this Packers offense is scoring points. You're gonna have to move the ball downfield, and you need those two guys to be involved if you're going to do that, because they're your top pass catchers. Darnell, had a 1,000-yard season last year. Cole Kmet has some really high expectations, and he looked really good in training camp. He should be a really good outlet for Justin, over the middle, in between those hashes, and we didn't really get to see that in week 1.
Yeah, prop markets generally in sportsbooks start to be released towards the end of the week. I think you're starting to see, especially for this game particularly, markets just now getting released here on this Friday. So some of that information is very key, right? How much guys will be involved and whether or not what the Packers will take away. But I like what you mentioned kind of at the beginning there, is that this is still going to be kind of a run-oriented team. David Montgomery was bottled up in week 1 against that 49ers defense. What was your sense, when talking to players and coaches about how maybe David Montgomery and this kind of rushing attack will respond with him, especially in week 2? Because right now I see his over-under at rushing yards at Caesar Sportsbook is 46.5.
46.5. My initial gut reaction is to go over on that. There's no panic at Hallis Hall based on what happened with David and the running game, especially early in that game. He did not have a whole lot of holes to work with, and I think it's as simple as that. And even though Khalil Herbert led them in rushing in that game, Luke Getsy pointed out to us that there were a couple of more favorable situations, and to Khalil's credit, he found the gap and ran through it and did his job. But certainly you want those types of holes when David Montgomery is out there. And I think that's going to improve here. It was really a struggle in that first half. I think that was really just more of the Bears sort of figuring out, what they do well and what works for them. I think we saw some adjustments there in that second half, and that is promising. You're going to have to get this run game going if this offense is going to work. And I think that the offensive line is going to keep improving as we go week to week here.
Yeah, and if it does, and if you think David Montgomery is going to bounce back, a good way to play this is with the boosted parlay that's available at Caesar Sportsbook, an exclusive boosted parlay thanks to our partnership. It is actually a Bet Chicago Sports parlay, and the parlay is 3 legs. It's Bears spread, which is 10.5. The current spread is 10 points, so already a half-point advantage for you. You're looking at Justin Fields over 49.5 rushing yards. So you kind of mentioned getting him more involved earlier just a little bit ago. So maybe that leads to that getting over the 50 rushing yard mark. And then David Montgomery just has to score a touchdown. And if you feel like he can bounce back this week, maybe that's a way to play this. But also over rushing yards is worth a look based off, what Sean was saying just a little bit ago. I did like what you mentioned on the Bears Insider podcast earlier this morning about how this is a young team, right? And so they had the advantage of playing at home in week 1, although obviously it ended up being in unfavorable conditions. But now this is really the bright lights, Sunday Night Football on the road in Lambeau. What are you expecting? And did you ask about this kind of throughout the week, just how they're going to respond maybe in this type of environment?
Yeah, I think some of these young guys, some of these rookies, Kyler Gordon said he's really excited to get out there and play in this situation. And, it's not that big of a deal for some of these guys like Kyler who are coming from Pac-12 schools, or guys who are coming from Jaquan Brisker is coming from Penn State. He played in some pretty intense environments in college. But then you look at a guy like Braxton Jones, your left tackle out of Southern Utah. He hasn't been in a situation quite like this, up until his debut last week. And certainly it's going to be a lot more hostile in Lambeau Field than it was at Soldier Field. So you do wonder about that with a young team. They got 15 rookies, the Bears, on this roster. That's possibly an issue. You could also make the argument that it's not an issue, that they don't know any, they are uncorrupted, if you will. They have nothing to lose going into this game. And a Packers team that is expecting to win the division, expecting to compete for the Super Bowl. They have a lot more to lose in this game, this week 2 game, after losing last week than the Bears do. And so, you can make the argument either way as far as the youth. I tend to lean toward Aaron Rodgers as a type of quarterback who is going to pick on young guys in the secondary. I'm going to be watching Kyler Gordon in this game. I'm going to be watching Jaquan Brisker because I think Aaron Rodgers is going to throw towards those guys. He has no reason to throw the ball near Jalen Johnson. We saw that a little bit last year when the Bears played at Lambeau. They did whatever they could to move Davante Adams away from Jalen. And in those situations, that's when they threw to him. And that's really what worked. How will the Packers go about doing that without Davante Adams? Are they going to find ways to get favorable matchups against these young guys in the secondary?
All right. Well, this is all great information, really helpful stuff. But I'm going to put you on the spot again for the second week in a row. First week, I think you correctly predicted the Bears would cover the spread. I think your score was within the margin of the spread. Bears obviously didn't need the points. They won outright. Let's see what you think now with a bigger spread going into week 2. what is your kind of final score prediction? And maybe people who are listening to this or watching this right now are able to kind of gather from what you think how the game's going to unfold to how they're going to approach their bets.
I'm going to do the same thing I did last week. I'm not going to pick the Bears to win this outright, but I am going to pick them to cover. I got a 21-14 Packers win. I think the Bears will be in this. There's reasons to be concerned if you're a Packers fan about what you saw last week, but I do think they're going to clean that up a little bit offensively and put a few more points on the board than they did against the Vikings.
A 21-14 win for the Packers. Obviously, that would point towards the under and the Bears covering the spread, which, given what the Packers have done to the Bears as of late, I think Bears fans might take that. I think that's going to do it with Sean Hammond doing here, giving me all this great information. Really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man, and so I want you to get out of here and get going home. But thank you so much again for being on here.
Yeah, Shane, thanks for having me, as always.
All right, see you. That was Sean Hammond, our Bears beat reporter for the Shaw Local News Network. Really great stuff again. I mean, he covers the Bears extremely well, and a lot of that information is very helpful for people who are trying to bet on this game. A lot of these times when you're betting and looking at lines, I mean, it is all about information, right? If you're one of the first to information, maybe that does give you some sort of advantage. It's a very sharp market, the NFL tends to be, so it's very tough to have that advantage. But really appreciate that stuff from Sean. And we'll plan on doing that every single Friday as much as he's available to. Obviously, again, he's a busy person covering that team on a daily basis. So whenever he can do it, extremely helpful for us. His total ended up going to 35 points, but my one bet for this game is actually on the over. I think my official score prediction ended up being 27-17. Leading to the over. The total currently now at Caesar Sportsbook is 41.5. I'd be surprised how much higher that got. I think it's been hovering around 42 and 41.5 over the last couple of days, ever since coming down a couple points from its opening price. But essentially, both these teams went under their point total in week one, and both these teams project to be more of an under team. And I think that you saw kind of a reaction to that. But now it's reached the point where it's 41.5 points. And I almost feel like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that it's that low, right? I think there's a couple points of value here. But also if you just factor in the fact that this team, like the Packers, have a double-digit spread and the total is as low as it is, like both those things can't happen, right? Unless the Bears just aren't scoring. And so while I'm not as convinced the Bears cover the spread as maybe Sean is, I think that projection is right in line with my number. I do think the total offers enough value that that's what I took. That's my one bet so far on this game. I will be betting the Aaron Rodgers interception prop. I will make it a little bit smaller just because he has not done it since 2018. So it's hard to bet on that happening, bet a lot on that happening. But I do like the total, and there will probably be a touchdown scorer bet that I play on Sunday. That I plan to do every single game day. I don't know if I'll ever actually win in these touchdown scorer bets because they're very hard to predict, but I will play it every Sunday and sprinkle a little bit of money on that. As for the rest of my week 2 NFL bets, it was a pretty good week 1 for me, so I'm hoping to kind of build off that. Week 2 right now, it's kind of a tough card. I've mentioned it on previous shows this week. It feels like we've all said, hey, let's not overreact to week 1, so much so that we're almost underreacting to week 2 because a lot of my spreads are right in line with what the current numbers are right now. And it's tough to feel like you feel strongly about taking too many games. That said, I did bet 2 of them earlier in the week. I took the Commanders plus 2.5. Right now, that spread is 1. I imagine it's going to be around 1 probably up until Sunday. The Lions do have a lot more injuries than maybe were expected at the end of the week. But I still think Commanders plus 2.5 is my number. I probably would take them all the way down to a pick 'em. I make them a favorite in this game. That's why I'm taking them. I make them Commanders minus 0.5. And I took Commanders money line. I took Commanders in a teaser. I might play the Commanders team total over because Scott Turner's offense was pretty good in week 1. I think Detroit's defense is a bit of a liability. And so I think there might be value in there. But basically, I felt so strongly about 2 games, and I'm just attacking them a bunch of different ways. Now, don't get me wrong. This game is, as the spread would indicate, this game is basically a coin flip, right? It's hard to say, hey, there's no way the Lions will win this game because the spread says that, hey, these teams have almost a 50-50 shot of winning this game. But I do think that the Commanders should be favored. This line was Commanders' favorite in the summer. I think the line in the summer was like -2 Commanders. And it just seems weird to me that it almost feels like the Lions are getting more credit for their narrow loss to the Eagles than the Commanders are for their win over Jacksonville. Because, the Eagles and Lions game was like every other Lions game we saw last year. The Eagles had a pick six in the second quarter, and basically we're going to win the game after that. The Lions never had a shot to win the game after that, but the Lions did score 4 times after that. All 4 of those touchdown drives came when they were trailing by double digits. So it just felt like a lot like last year where Dan Campbell's team, covered the spread. They never gave up. They fought really hard, and that's great. That's how you cover as an underdog. That's why he's done so, 12 times already, I think, in the first 18 games here. But they were 3-13 last year. They still have 3 wins under Dan Campbell. And now by betting the Lions, you need them to win the game. And so I'll just bet against that, right? I'll bet the Commanders. I know they're playing on the road, but the Lions appear more banged up. I think they have the weapons on offense to at least take advantage of this Lions defense that, was the worst ranked unit by Pro Football Focus last year. And I expect to be just as bad this year. And so, Carson Wentz is going to do Carson Wentz things, but the Lions won't be able to stop the Commanders too much. And I expect this to be somewhat of a high-scoring game, and I will take, I think, the better team in this scenario. My other bet is the Panthers plus 2.5 against the Giants. Right now, I believe the line is down to 1.5. There might be a 2 hovering out there as well if you can find it. But same thing with the Commanders, right? I bet the Panthers plus 2.5. I bet them on the money line. I teased them with the Commanders, and I might end up playing the team total on the Panthers. It's the exact same thing. I make the Panthers a slight favorite on the road against the Giants. So I will take the couple extra points of value here against the Giants. Again, similar to the last game, would not be shocked if the Giants win. Not saying that the Giants have no shot. I just find it hard to lay and expect the Giants to win by a field goal when they have Daniel Jones. And I also thought that these two teams just had the same exact outcomes last week, except for the Panthers lost and the Giants won. They both made late charges, but the Panthers lost on a walk-off field goal by the Browns, and the Giants won on a 2-point conversion that may have been questionable at the time. And so I'll just take the team that was getting points in a game that I think is closer to 50-50 than maybe the odds would indicate. And, there was a lot to like about what the Panthers were able to put together at the end. Baker Mayfield was able to get going in the fourth quarter. And he was playing a team that really knew him really well, right? The Browns. And yet the Panthers still kind of aided the Browns with a lot of stupid penalties. There was a pass interference there in the second quarter that gave the Browns their first touchdown in the game. There was a roughing the passer on that last drive that helped the Browns get in position for the game-winning field goal. And so I just think the Panthers getting the points in a game that was, over the summer, closer to a pick 'em, makes a lot of sense to me. And so I ended up teasing both from their 2.5-point spread to 8.5. And it's not going to feel great. I'm going to wake up Sunday morning and I'm going to know that I have money on Carson Wentz and Baker Mayfield. Not going to be a really exciting Sunday afternoon for me. And I could live to regret it. That is fine. That is going to happen over the course of the NFL season. You're going to get things wrong. But in a week 2 that there wasn't a whole lot of value throughout the slate, I just thought those two kind of stood above the rest. I will have a show on Monday, and I will preview kind of the Monday Night Football game as well. But I'm also on the under in the Eagles and Vikings. I believe the number I got was at 51.5. But I don't know if that number is still available. But it's one of those games. Primetime unders have been 4-0 so far. I think that spread or that total got a little too high for teams who are kind of run oriented and may use up less possessions as a result. That said, again, I think the Bears-Packers game could go over and kind of ruin that primetime under streak. And so that is my bet for the Bears-Packers. I will have probably another bet for Bears-Packers but we will probably dive into that on the Sunday show. Again, I will have a Packers-related guest on the Sunday show just before kickoff. We're going to go on for like 20-ish minutes to just talk about how we're going to bet this game right before kickoff and kind of kill that time that's pretty dead in between the afternoon slate and Sunday Night Football. I'll see you then, though. That will do it for this show. This was great. It was great to have Sean Hammond again talking. Hopefully we can do that every single Friday. But for now, for Sean Hammond, I'm Shane Jackson. Thank you so much for listening to the Bet Chicago Sports Podcast. And I'll see you on Sunday right before kickoff on the Bears-Packers Sunday Night Football matchup.